This is, without question, one of the most important episodes of Brighteon Broadcast News that I've recorded all year so far. This is Mike Adams here, and this is the episode for Friday, July 21st, 2023. Thank you for joining me. Now, the audio portion here is going to be kept, I hope, relatively short because I've got a full studio interview coming up with Dr. Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity. And Dr. Martenson, this is the first time I've been able to interview him, but I've respected his work and his research for many years. I became aware of him during the COVID years, but he and I didn't even talk about COVID. We talked about the financial crisis that is unfolding, the global debt crisis, the currency crisis, and the supply chain collapse that is already accelerating. And I got to say that this conversation that you're about to hear today, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I'm just saying that this is the kind of conversation that you will rarely hear, and it can only happen between two individuals, each of whom is extremely well researched and knowledgeable about money and finance and supply chains and geopolitics and all of that. This is the conversation you're about to hear is almost unheard of across even independent media, except you will hear it from other really informed people like Mike Maloney or Robert Kiyosaki or Andy Schectman or people like that who share this knowledge set. So there are people, but this is not a mainstream conversation. It's not a dumbed down conversation. This is a high level, very insightful conversation, and I was just thrilled to be able to have Dr. Chris Martenson on to have this discussion. Again, it's going to blow you away. Now, speaking of Andy Schectman, by the way, he's the president of Miles Franklin. I'm going to have Andy Schectman on real soon. We're in touch with him, and he's been proven right, fully vindicated over his warnings about the BRICS monetary system. He's been warning about this since 2020, by the way. And of course, a lot of people mocked him and teased him. No, that couldn't be happening. The dollar's fine. Nobody's going to abandon the dollar. And now here we stand, 1 month away from the announcement of the BRICS nations coming in August. August 22nd is the date that's anticipated to be this announcement of what's rumored to be a gold-backed, decentralized cryptocurrency international transaction system that's backed by Russia and China and, of course, India and the BRICS nations, plus supposedly 41 others is what's being talked about in the media. But then I interviewed Steve Quayle also earlier today for a special report that's going to air next week. And Steve Quayle said it's more like 140 countries. And he said that what we're about to see is a massive global repudiation of the dollar. The dollar is going to die in very short order, according to Steve Quayle. And again, that interview is coming up next week, but I'm hearing the exact same thing from Andy Schectman and then also from James Rickards. So there's a story by James Rickards at dailyreckoning.com, always a worthy website, rooted in Austrian economics, which is the only system that actually anybody should be studying because it's the one that is correct. But this article by James Rickards is called "We're at War." And I need to read for you a couple of paragraphs from James Rickards. And by the way, if you don't know who James Rickards is, you should. I think his most famous book is Currency Wars. And he was at the helm of LTCM, Long-Term Capital Management, back in 1997 and 98, when it was the first too big to fail. And he helped negotiate the bailout of LTCM. Back then, it was only a few $1 billion, but the whole global economic system was about to collapse because of some currency bets that went wrong and that were highly leveraged through LTCM. Now, James Rickards also has, he worked for the CIA at one point, I think as a financial analyst for the CIA. So he does have contacts with the agencies. And some people think that gives him more credibility. Some people think it gives him less credibility. But that's up for you to decide. I think that as an economist, as a financial person, James Rickards nails it. And I've listened to his books, I think all of his books, several times. It's I rarely do that, but his books are worth listening to. I listen to them in audiobook format. But let me read for you some of the paragraphs of what James Rickards has just posted 2 days ago. Here it is. Quote, "I've been studying monetary economics for about 50 years," he says. "All of my research has led to one conclusion." All right? Listen up. This is it. Quote, "We're going to see the collapse of the international monetary system." And when I say that, he writes, I specifically mean a collapse in confidence in paper currencies around the world. It's not just the death of the dollar or the demise of the euro. It's a collapse of confidence in all paper currencies, he says. All paper currencies. And then he goes through a little bit of history of how there used to be a gold standard and how Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971 and the current monetary system is over 50 years old and so on and so forth, and how the U.S. weaponized the dollar against Russia using the SWIFT system, all these things that you and I have talked about quite a bit. And then he gets to this. And by the way, this is exactly what Steve Quayle has been saying. This is exactly what Andy Schechtman has been saying and what I've been saying. Here it is. Nations around the world realize that as long as they are dependent on dollars for holding assets or purchasing global commodities, like energy, oil, minerals, everything, food, nitrogen, fertilizer, they will be under the thumb of those who control the dollar payments system, which is basically the U.S., with some help from big European and Japanese banks. So nations also know that while Russia is the current target of sanctions, others could easily be next. So if China turns up the pressure on Taiwan, for example, then it could soon be subject to dollar-based sanctions as well. The only way to escape the sanctions, Rickards writes, is to escape the dollar. And then, he says, this largely explains the fairly rapid development of the new BRICS currency, which is set to be announced next month, which is what we've talked about. And when I was interviewing Dr. Chris Martenson today, he and I got to this exact topic, and Dr. Martenson said, yes, it was, late February of 2022 when the Western world, the United States in particular, weaponized the SWIFT system against Russia. And from that day, history changed because that sent a message to the world that the dollar is your enemy. And that if you want to have any freedom or liberty as a nation, economic freedom, political freedom, freedom of speech, freedom to vote the way you want in the UN or whatever, you have to get out of the dollar. You have to stop using the dollar. So it was the United States under the corrupt, criminal Biden regime and the State Department with all those lunatics, Sullivan and Blinken and Nuland and the rest of the cabal, who actually destroyed the credibility of the dollar by using it as a weapon to pummel Russia, which failed, by the way. It didn't even work. It didn't even take down Russia's economy. If anything, Russia's economy got stronger. And then that sent a message to the other countries around the world to say, hey, if you ditch the dollar, you're actually going to be better off because the dollar's losing value every day. They're printing the dollar like mad. And if you use the dollar, then you're under the thumb of the evil American empire, you see. So because of the actions of the Biden cabal, the Russians and the Chinese and the Indians and everybody else got together and they built on a rapid timetable the new decentralized BRICS cryptocurrency international transaction clearinghouse system, which is about to be rolled out in a month. Now, by the way, the FedNow system was just rolled out in the United States yesterday. We're going to get to that in a second. The FedNow system is a joke compared to what the BRICS nations are about to roll out next month. And if indeed they roll this out next month, it's the beginning of the end of the dollar. And those people who are saying, no, the dollar is going to be good for 10 years. No, it won't. I'd be surprised if it's good for 10 months. I mean, it's not going to be overnight. I get that it's going to collapse. But the collapse can be extremely rapid in our digital age where nations and corporations can move financial instruments very rapidly. This isn't the 1980s where you had to go into the bank and you had to, sign documents and it took time to send wires. No, everything happens electronically right now. It's fast. Nations can ditch the dollar just as fast as customers ditched Silicon Valley Bank, which collapsed over roughly about a 3-day time period, or maybe 4 days at the most. In a matter of days, the world can ditch the dollar. And they want to, because nobody wants to be under the thumb of the insane criminal lunatics of the Biden regime. Nobody wants to be under that. So the fact that all these nations, BRICS nations and more, are about to announce and embrace this new decentralized currency for international trading, the fact that this is happening so quickly has the West panicked. And that's why they are desperately trying to corral people into a central bank digital currency system where you will be a slave. You'll be completely controlled and surveilled. You won't own your money. You'll only be granted access to it with permission from the government as long as you behave the way they want you to behave, and that you speak in the way they want you to speak, and so on. Now, the FedNow system just launched. So from Reuters, Fed launches long-awaited instant payments service, modernizing system. Yeah, of course, Reuters is talking about how this is so great and awesome and everything. It's going to be faster and better, and everybody's going to love it. It's good for everybody, right? But what they don't tell you is that this is the precursor to the central bank digital currency slave grid system that will completely control and surveil all your money. But what the Fed is lacking is a crisis. They need a financial crisis to collapse the banking system, let's say the small and mid-sized banks, and then offer a rescue package to the American people to say, here, we've rescued you. Your money's safe, just not in those, zombie banks. Your money is safe over here in this central bank digital currency system, the CBDC. Yeah, just give us your thumbprint, your iris scan, a breath sample, a DNA swab, an anal swab, whatever. Give us everything. Give us a profile picture, a front-on picture, a nude picture. Just give us everything you have, everything you own, and you'll be able to get your universal basic income and your bailout money. Because, the Russians collapsed the system, don't you know? The Russians collapsed it. It's the Russians again. Whatever goes wrong, it's the Russians. So when the dollar goes to zero, it's the Russians. They did it. Russian hackers. We're going to hear all this nonsense. I mean, you can already see it. The blueprint is so obvious. And then they're going to try to corral everybody into a central bank digital currency system. This is why I have said with a high sense of urgency for, a couple of months at least now, that you hear me saying that I'm getting all of my after-tax personal savings completely out of the traditional financial system. I do not plan to leave hardly anything in any bank, in any brokerage. I don't own any stocks whatsoever. I don't own any bonds. I don't own any treasuries. But I do still own a little bit of Peter Schiff's investment fund, by the way, which is focused on gold and silver. And I may have a few shares of some silver and gold ETFs. I got to look at that. But the point is I'm getting out of the traditional finance system. And I'm moving my assets into 3 things: gold, silver, and crypto, as I've been talking about here. And what do those 3 things have in common? You have self-custody. So if the banks collapse, if the dollar collapses, I'm not holding any dollars. If the banks collapse, I don't have any money in the banks. If the whole system goes down, I don't have anything in the system. I've got gold buried in the backyard or whatever, right? I've got crypto in an offline cold wallet protected with a seed phrase that nobody can possibly guess. Or, other similar things. So to people that are asking, how do we protect ourselves from the collapse? The answer is pretty much what I just said, actually. in my assessment, this is my opinion, obviously. I'm not your financial advisor, so that's my disclaimer. You do your own research, get your own professional advice, take your own risks as are appropriate for you. But for me, I think the risk is leaving the money in the bank. I think the risk is holding dollars, which is not money, but rather it is currency. Currency is not money because the currency keeps losing value. Mike Maloney teaches everybody about this. So if you hold dollars, you're holding a rigged system. You're being cheated daily. So that's silly. Why would you hold dollars that are losing purchasing power every day in a system that may not give you permission to access your dollars, or a system that's on the verge of failure and bankruptcy anyway? makes no sense, right? So the exit ramps are right in front of you right now, and they are called gold and silver and crypto. And maybe land, if you've got a good place to get some land that can hold value. It's got good dirt and surface water, you can grow food, whatever. It's got some forests and trees and herbs and wild foods and things like that. Yeah, that has intrinsic value too. It's not as liquid as the other things, and it's very difficult to find these days because everybody with money is trying to get out of the city right now. They're trying to get out into the countryside in lots of places. The Ozarks in Missouri, the Great Redoubt in Idaho, or places in Texas, for example. A lot of people are moving to Florida. People are moving to Tennessee and setting up farms there. People are getting out of New York City and LA and Chicago because those cities are going to collapse into total destruction. We're talking a total collapse of those cities. I mean, it's incredible what's happening. And I hear resonance with all these concepts, with all the smart people that I talk to, including today's guest, Dr. Chris Martenson. And, I hear the same thing from Robert Kiyosaki. He's the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author. I hear the same thing from Andy Schectman. I hear the same thing from Steve Quayle. I hear the same thing from all the top people that I talk to, John Rubino and others. Okay, so it's a consistent warning. And we are all running out of time. That's why you hear me with a sense of urgency about getting out of dollars, getting out of the traditional financial system. Believe me, there's going to be a bank freeze, a massive holiday, maybe a bail-in. And a bail-in is where the bank takes your money and says, oh, thank you for that. We're going to use your money to bail ourselves out, and it's our money now, no longer yours. You never get it. That's called a bail-in, and that's legal, by the way. In America, that's legal. They're going to do that. They're just going to take all the depositors' money and just confiscate it and say, it's ours now. Why? Because possession is 9/10 of the law. Have you ever heard that? Possession is 9/10 of the law. So if you want to have assets, you got to possess them. You have to have custody. Again, gold and silver and crypto. There you go. You have custody and land. Now, the FedNow system means you have to trust the Fed. So now the Federal Reserve, in order for you to send money, so this is like a Federal Reserve version of, PayPal or Venmo or Zelle or whatever all these payment services are. This is the Federal Reserve version of that, where, of course, they're going to have everything about you, your social security number, your name, who you're sending to, where you're sending from, zero privacy. They'll be able to track everything that you've done, all your money transactions. Again, it's almost like using Bitcoin. It's a public blockchain in essence, except with FedNow, it's not really a blockchain. It's just a centralized ledger run by the banking cartel. They're going to know everything about you and all your finances if you use that system. Do you trust the Federal Reserve? The same cartel of banksters that's been looting the country since the creature from Jekyll Island in, 1913? You trust them with your money? You trust them with your privacy, with your name? You'd be crazy to trust them. I'm not saying that the FedNow system won't maybe function. It probably will be convenient, because surrendering your liberty is always convenient. They make it convenient. Oh, look how convenient it is. Just give us all your details and give up your privacy, and then we'll send the money very quickly for you. Yeah, sure they will. While they're tracking you. And then one day it'll all be weaponized against you. They'll know how much money you have. They'll know where you've sent money, where you've received it from, and so on. And then they can confiscate it, by the way, because they know you have it. So the FedNow system is really a surveillance grid over your financials. And the only ways that I know of to get off of the grid when it comes to assets is to convert your assets into three things: gold, silver, and crypto. And it has to be privacy coins in crypto, by the way, because otherwise it's a very public blockchain. So gold and silver are off the grid. They can't track it. They don't know where it is. They don't know how much you have left. They don't know how much, maybe you got from private parties. They don't know. Now, yeah, they might have receipts. If you bought it with a bank wire or a check or something or a credit card, sure, they have those receipts, but they don't know where the gold coins went after that. No way to know. If you bought crypto, especially privacy crypto, like Monero, for example, or some of the other coins that we're going to be featuring on Decentralized TV coming up, because we've done some pretty amazing interviews, well, they don't know how much you have or where it is or how to get it. because actually it doesn't even exist in any one physical place. It exists on the blockchain. It's like a hologram. How do you shatter a hologram? Every piece has the whole hologram again. They can't shut it down. So we're all going to have to make a choice, as I've said. We're going to have to choose which kind of digital money system to use. And on one side, it's going to be the FedNow system. And on the other side, it's going to be decentralized money systems, which apparently is going to include the BRICS nations' decentralized crypto clearinghouse system. I wonder if they're going to let non-government groups use that system. If so, I could imagine lots of just ordinary people buying into that blockchain just as a store of value. Just because the dollar's losing so much value, if you want to maybe have a safe place to stash your assets, and if China and Russia are going to back that blockchain by hard assets, commodities, maybe gold or oil, it kind of makes sense that that's going to be a store of value better than the dollar. It would be rational to shift money into that system. I'm not sure that that's the way it's going to work. I would imagine maybe the U.S. authorities would outlaw anybody trying to buy shares of that system because, of course, they want to force you to hold on to, dollars that are devaluing rapidly because they need you to participate in the con, right? To keep the scam going, they got to have people to keep scamming, and that's you. That's the American worker. So the FedNow system is not a positive thing. It's a slave trap. It's to enslave you. It's to surveil you. It's to roll out a CBDC. Eventually, this is the pilot stage, but they want to roll out a CBDC to track and control everything that you do with your money, all your transactions, and even limit your shopping so that you're not allowed to buy more food than what the government says you can buy. Forced rationing. Or you're not allowed to buy more ammo than what they say you can buy. Or gasoline. Or, a lawnmower that uses a gas engine or whatever. Whatever they are against at the moment, you won't be able to buy that. It could be beef at the grocery store. You got a beef limit. Limit 1 pound per month. Enjoy your 2 hamburgers, That's it. That's all you get for the month. The rest of the time, you got to eat these cricket McNuggets over here. You see a delicious crickets. On sale, 50 cents off. But this is how this is going to work. So if you want money outside of that system, look into this and do what's right for you, but get moving is all I'm saying. Get moving on it. I'm moving on it. And I found out it takes a lot longer than you think because the banks don't want to let go of any of their assets. Now, we're going to jump into the interview here shortly. I'm almost done. But I brought this up in my conversation with Dr. Martinson. I said, Robert Kiyosaki was quoting somebody when he said that the reason people are poor is because they don't know the difference between real money and fake money. And that's absolutely true. I found that to be a very insightful quote. In fact, I recorded a whole podcast on that, and I think I'm going to develop that concept into an entire episode here, but about more than just money. See, the people who are poor, they hold on to fake money, which is dollars, fake currency. But they don't understand real money, which is gold and silver and certain types of crypto and land and real assets and things like that, right? But it's not just about money. They also, these same people that hold on to fake money, they use fake medicine. Like experimental jabs, or psychiatric drugs that don't really work except they make you suicidal, things like that. So they're into fake medicine and fake money, but they reject real money, i.e. gold, and real medicine, i.e. healing foods, nutrition, herbal medicines, medicinal mushrooms, things that are real medicine. And the same is true with food. So these people tend to eat a lot of fake food, processed food, junk food, mineral depleted food. It's not really food. It's some kind of, factory Frankenstein monstrosity of genetically engineered, partially hydrogenated soybean crap. And they think that's food. And so they live out their lives suffering with disease and pain and poor, by the way, because again, they believe in fake money. But you and I, we understand what is real food. Real food is full of nutrition. It's full of life. It's sprouts. It's the food you grow in your own garden. It's the local food that you get. It's the raw ingredients that you blend into a smoothie or you make into a salad or you do your own thing with real ingredients, not just processed factory food. And so because you understand the difference between fake food and real food, then you are healthy. And because you understand the difference between fake money and real money, you can be wealthy, or you can at least hold on to the wealth that you have, right? And you understand the difference between fake medicine and real medicine, so you don't become a victim of counterfeit medicine that makes people sick, i.e. vaccines. And because you know the difference between fake news and real news, then you have real information, real knowledge. Whereas the people who tune into CNN all day, they have fake knowledge, delusional fantasy worlds in their heads. They're living in a fantasy. Everything that they think they know is a lie, and everything that's actually real in the world, they reject. I mean, think about it. These same people that take fake food, fake medicine, fake money, and fake news, they will sit there and tell you with a straight face that a man can become a woman and have a child, and that's rooted in the science. I mean, these people are insane, but it's consistent. Their insanity is consistent. Of course they have fake biology. I mean, some of them actually have surgery and they have fake holes made. They do. They call it a bonus hole. It's like a fake hole, a whole fake hole. These people are insane, and they have a fake language. They make up all their own fake language of different, genders, and they keep talking about all the patriarchal whatever. And, you go to a typical college campus right now, and they're not even speaking a normal English language anymore. They've made up all these victim terms. So they're living in a fake world, and they won't make it. This is the point. Fake money will leave you broke. Fake food will leave you diseased. Fake medicine might get you killed. Fake news will leave you delusional. And on and on. So I've recorded a separate podcast about that we'll post, and I think that's a really interesting concept. But it's so true, and it's so simple. That people are so blind to what is real versus what is fake. Robert Kiyosaki nails it. The typical person, Mark Dice did this, where he did these videos on the boardwalk out in California, and he walked up to people and he tried to give them a 1 ounce gold coin, I think, in exchange for like a chocolate bar that they had, or for their hat, or whatever they were holding, like a book or something. I saw these videos. Mark Dice is the master of this. He goes up and says, "Hey, this is a gold coin," and he was standing right next to a gold shop. He said, "You can go into the gold shop and they can confirm this is a 1 ounce gold coin. I will give you this 1 ounce gold coin in exchange for that ice cream cone that you're carrying." And people would give him all kinds of excuses. "Well, I kind of like this ice cream, and I don't know about that gold coin. I don't know about that one. Gotta have my rocky road." Their ice cream cone costs $5, and that 1 ounce gold coin is worth $2,000. But people are so stupid, they don't even recognize money when they see it. They've probably never even seen real money. All they've seen is greenback currency, which is going to zero. So they don't even recognize what gold looks like or what real money is. Anybody who knew what they were doing would be like, "You're going to give me a 1 ounce gold coin for this ice cream?" And Mark Dice is like, "Yep, I'm going to give you 1 ounce gold coin for your ice cream." I would be like, "How much ice cream do you want?" Like, how much gold do you have? Because I'll do this all day, right? Any intelligent person would do that, but people are stupid. They're dumb as sheeple. They have no idea what is real money. And so they die broke and diseased and injected, jabbed up and spiked up. And this is probably describing some people that you once knew who are already dead, right? Because I know that's true for me. I knew people that are dead. They believed all the fake stuff. And they thought those of us living in the real world were crazy. "Oh, you're crazy that you think gold is money. You're crazy you think nutrition matters. And you're crazy you think herbs have medicinal value." Right? And now they're dead. Dead in the ground. Dead. Probably went to hell. They didn't even believe in God or anything. Just dead as a rock. You probably know people like that. Don't be like that. All right, there's one more thing happening I got to tell you about, and then we're going to go into the interview with Dr. Chris Martenson, and here it is. And I got to give credit to Hal Turner for putting this together. On his website, Hal Turner says, "The mass media begins telling public Ukraine is losing territorial concessions to Russia and the West can do no more." And so he's put together a summary from mainstream news outlets here that are all admitting that the war in Ukraine is now lost, according to the West. I mean, you talk about doing a 180 here, huh? This whole time, it's all been propaganda. We're winning. Russia's losing. You know, our counteroffensive is going to destroy Russia. We're going to take it all back. And, all of our tanks are working great. And now, all at once, the narrative has shifted. And this narrative, which is now an admission of failure, this underscores the urgency on the part of the West to have another crisis, such as a financial false flag or a grid down false flag, in order to cover up their failures in Ukraine. And, of course, to cover up all the money laundering and kickbacks and bribery and fraud, of which the Biden family received tens of millions of dollars. I mean, they are actual criminals, a bunch of crooks that just take bribes from Burisma and other companies. It's all coming out now in Congress, by the way. I'm not even going to go into it here, but you can follow that on Breitbart.com. But here we go. Wall Street Journal says, rapid loss of tanks shocked Kiev in the West. The Telegraph newspaper in London, the West will call on Kiev for territorial concessions to Russia. And they write, the losses suffered by armed forces of Ukraine cast a shadow on the reputation of the Bradleys, the Leopards, and the other weapon systems of the NATO countries. The biggest losses in the armored units of Ukraine are caused by Russian helicopters. Yeah, aren't those called the Ka-52s, I think? Are they called alligators? I seem to remember. So what's happening is that all this equipment that the West is sending to Ukraine is getting blown up and burned up. And the photos are devastating to the military-industrial complex and their revenues, because how can they sell weapons when everybody in the world sees all these photos of those weapons all burned to a dead, smoking husk on the dirt of Ukraine because they hit a Russian mine or something? I mean, this is showing that the West weapons really don't work. You know, Russia's got drones that can blow the tracks off of tanks, and these drones are not very expensive compared to the tanks, right? Russia's got apparently this unlimited supply of drones, and they have, explosives on the nose or whatever, and they just fly the drones right into all the vehicles, and it's done. The West is just throwing billions of dollars worth of vehicles, and all they're doing is littering the battlefield with the empty, like I said, smoking husks of burned steel and smeared blood all over the fields of Ukraine. It's embarrassing to the West and their money-making schemes, you see. All right, next newspaper, the American Spectator, says that Western sanctions have not brought the Russian economy to its knees. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. Yeah. On the contrary, the U.S. and NATO are running out of funds for Kiev. I mean, think about this. So America put all these sanctions through the SWIFT system to try to destroy the Russian economy. And what happened? The Russian economy came back strong. The American economy, and the European economy especially, is being freaking devastated. Devastated. All right, the Financial Times of London. Headline, farewell to arms. The West has nothing else to do to help Ukraine. The armament is running out, and the stocks used by Kiev will have to be replenished for years, writes the Financial Times. Yeah, just like we said, it's all running out. Because, the West sends over munitions and artillery and Bradley vehicles, and the Russians just blow it all up. Did the lunatics think, in the U.S. State Department, did they think that magical tanks can be pulled out of people's asses and thrown onto the battlefield? Oh, another tank, No, you actually have to build it. You have to source raw materials. There's a supply chain of thousands of parts. You can't just make them out of nothing. You can't just build tanks like you push propaganda and press releases. And by the way, all the censorship efforts of the White House can't make more ammo. You can censor all day long. You can print fake counterfeit currency all day long. But the fake currency isn't artillery. It isn't tanks. It isn't steel. It isn't fuel. It isn't electronics. All your fakery with your propaganda, your censorship, your faked elections, your rigged currency, just your endless steaming piles of government bullshit. They don't add up to anything in the real world because you can't make artillery rounds. And so you lose. You lose. And it's just showing that Russia actually has a better grasp on its supply chain, its economy, its logistics than does any country in the West, frankly. In Germany, the Bild magazine, B-I-L-D, Bild, the losses are colossal, it says. There's not enough equipment, and a counterattack is not possible. All right? So, and then Hal Turner reports out that the mass media has been specifically instructed to start an effort to change the narrative on Ukraine and to change it fast. And you know why? You know why? Because it's just about done. Despite the bravery of the Ukrainian people, their resources are done. And Russia is on the verge of doing whatever it wants to do in Ukraine. Whatever its goals are, territory, taking over ports like Odessa, even taking the capital city like Kiev, whatever Russia wants to do, it's on the verge of being able to do that. There's absolutely nothing the West can do to stop them. And if they try to stop them, Russia has tactical nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles, and the West can't do anything to stop those. So this fraudulent war is, the outcome is done. Okay, Scott Ritter was right. Gonzalo Lira was right. And the West was wrong. The West was delusional. Of course they were, because they're delusional criminals. You know, they weren't even elected. And I even think that Joe Biden's plans to try to start World War III with Russia are going to fail. He's trying to provoke Russia into a nuclear launch, but I think that's going to fail as well. So that's pretty major news. The media is now finally saying something that reflects reality on the ground with the situation in Ukraine and Russia. And for me, I just want to say I pray for a rapid end to the hostilities. I don't want to see any more innocent people die. I don't want to see Ukraine destroyed. I don't want to see depleted uranium. I want to see the good people of Ukraine be able to get back to rebuilding their economy, living in peace, living in stability, rejoining with their families, and not living in fear of their own dictatorial Zelensky regime, which it's a corrupt dictatorship, of course, by the way. So I want to see peace, and I want to see trade restored internationally with Russia, because everybody benefits when there's more international trade. Remember what they say. If products and services don't cross borders, then tanks and artillery will. If you don't trade, you end up in wars. And if you want to stop the wars, you need to reinitiate trade, which is something that the West refuses to do, because the United States wields its economic sanctions like a bully weapon against the other nations of the world. The United States is the bully. Arguably, the U.S. empire is the most evil empire on planet Earth right now, at least under the control of this dictatorial, violent regime of liars and crooks and lunatics. It is the most evil empire on the planet. And every nation out there realizes that, and they want nothing to do with America or its currency, the dollar, or its military, its failed military that's gone woke, where, you know, if you just claim to be transgender, you don't even have to be deployed to the front lines anymore. You just say, oh, I'm a man identifying as a woman. I guess I get to stay here and, you know, play foosball all day, whatever. And take gender bender medications. And that's the military now. If you pretend to be a woman, you don't have to fight. Did you know that? That's official policy. It's the laughing stock of the world. We're the only military in the world where the men pretend to be women so they don't have to fight. And that there's an Admiral, Rachel Levine, who's actually a man pretending to be a woman and has been given an admiral ranking. It's a joke. It's a clown show. The rest of the world looks at this and they laugh their asses off. The U.S. military has become a sick, twisted, perverted joke in the eyes of the entire world. I mean, probably the military of Iraq is laughing at America's military now under these woke-tards. You're going to have soldiers with bras and pantyhose and rainbows marching on you now? Is that what it's going to look like? Probably. An artillery that launches rainbows in the sky? You know, is that it now? The world is laughing. The world's most backward military can probably defeat the United States at this point. The U.S. was even defeated by Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. It's unreal. And the U.S. thinks they can defeat Russia? Not a chance. Not a chance that's ever going to happen. And so what's clear is that the U.S. is now trying to pull out of this because they don't want the shame of being defeated by Russia. Because that's exactly what would happen. If the U.S. sends 5,000 tanks into the Russian defenses, then you're going to have 5,000 burned up tanks. If the U.S. sends 500 F-16s, you're going to have 500 dead, burning F-16s in fireballs on the ground and probably several hundred dead F-16 pilots. That's what's going to happen. And they know that now. At least some people know that, and they don't want to see this happen because the shame, the embarrassment, the loss of power. The U.S. military has become the joke of the world thanks to woke-tardism. You notice how as countries collapse, like banana republics, that the military leaders have more and more colorful badges all over their chests, their uniforms. It's like all these crazy ribbons and colors and everything. I mean, it looks like a total joke, man. Starts to look like, I don't know, some Caribbean, military dictatorship leader. That's what our current leaders look like in the Pentagon. And it's a shame because I know a lot of great veterans, right? Real men who served their country, who did their duty in the Navy, in the Air Force, in the Marines, in the Army, wherever. Some in law enforcement. There's a lot of good men and women who did serve their country and who aren't crazy. And even they're looking at this military and they're aghast, like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This is completely insane. So, just to be clear, I am pro-veteran 100%. And I am pro-law enforcement, by the way, men and women in blue, putting their lives on the line. But if you want to be safe, if you want to be effective, then you can't pander to the trans cult in the military. You got to have soldiers, not trannies in high heels and bras, and you're replacing the M4 service rifles with like laser-powered dildos or whatever. Yeah, it's not going to work. I mean, it'd be fun to see you try that. Actually, I want to see like the tranny brigade wielding like high-powered dildos against the Russian artillery. Let's just see what happens. That'd be one that the Russians would never stop laughing about. But it's like all we did was we aimed the drones at the rainbow flags and we got them all. Unbelievable. However, they would say that in Russian. It's like they came in waving rainbow flags and pantyhose with high-powered laser dildos, and then they stepped on all the landmines. Jeez. I don't want to see anybody hurt. I want to see peace. So I'm not calling for something like that. I would rather, I want to see the restoration of sanity in our world. We need to live in a world where everybody agrees that there are only two genders. There's men and there's women. And a man can't become a woman. We need to live in a world where we all agree that children should not be mutilated because of your virtue signaling, libtard social pressures. Why are you mutilating children? We need to live in a world where we have equal justice for all. And like they said in the Pledge of Allegiance. Remember that? Remember saying that? With liberty and justice for all. Is it too much to ask to restore sanity and prosecute the criminals, the traitors, the crooks, the pedophiles, the mutilators, the liars, the propagandists, the warmongers? Huh? Yeah. We'll see what happens. But I'm not keeping my hopes up that anything other than just a total collapse is what we're probably looking at. So we'll see. All right, with all that said, which took longer than I had planned, but such is podcasting, we're going to jump into the interview with Dr. Chris Martenson and see what he thinks about all these things. Now, he's more cautious with his words than I am, which perhaps might be a wise thing on his part. But he reaches many similar conclusions on the economic side of things and the currency side of things. So let's jump into that, see what he has to say, and I'll be back with you on the other side. Welcome to today's interview on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and I've been a fan for several years of our next guest, but I've not yet had the chance to interview him. He's gracious enough to join us today. His website is called peakprosperity.com, and he's the author of a new book called The Crash Course. It's Dr. Chris Martenson, PhD, and his analysis of world events, starting with COVID and now into economic and financial issues, I think is just absolutely spot on. So thank you, Dr. Martenson, for joining us today. It's a real honor to have you on.
Well, it's a real honor to be with you, Mike, and all your listeners today. So can't wait to have this conversation.
Oh, me too. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. Now, I would characterize your voice as one of reason. You are cautious in your conclusions. You are well-read. You're obviously highly intelligent. You have quite a background in the sciences and I believe epidemiology as well. Is that right?
Well, I came out of the Department of Pathology at Duke, got a PhD in that. So it was, but toxicology was my subspecialty. So that's where I started. But then I got an MBA and I went off and I did corporate finance for a while. So I kind of speak science. I speak numbers, economic things.
Well, no wonder. Everything you're saying makes so much sense because you really have to have a big picture view these days to understand the dynamics and the interaction of what's going on. So you and I both agree we don't want to talk about COVID that much today because it's all been said. Mm-hmm. And there are other, even I think more drastic things happening in the world. So how about this? Let's just start with your book, your course called The Crash Course, and tell us what that is about. It's available at booksellers everywhere. There's also an audio version at audible.com. Tell us about that book, and then that will start off the questions that I have for you.
Sure. I'd love to. So the Crash Course, it's a big picture kind of a synthesis, because as you said, I think we really have to look at the big picture now. There's so many giant moving pieces. So my particular gift is to be able to take pretty complicated things and explain them in a way so that people can understand them. People without a whole lot of training or jargon or all of that. In fact, I think that stuff works against you. So part of the reason I think I've been so successful at it is I'm not an expert in any of these things, but I learned enough about economics, about our energy systems, fossil fuels in particular, how they operate, how our debt-based money system really operates at a fine enough level to sort of have the light bulb go off, and then connect all of that too with the environment, which is both pollution we put in, resources we take out. And when I put all those pieces together, listen, I can save people a bunch of reading. The Crash Course basically says, no surprise, we're on a really unsustainable trajectory here as a species, not America. I mean, individual mileage will vary. Individual countries have different challenges, but together on the globe, man, we're over the tips of our skis on this. Seems obvious. Mike, I got to be honest. One of the things I've learned I have in abundance, which is both a curse and a gift, is just common sense.
Right.
Just like you. I mean, we just add things up and we go, doesn't this make sense? But only to people who don't already have a pre-conditioned belief system that's standing in the way of them understanding that thing. It turns out it's a lot of folks. So to me, it's just I'm giving people common sense stuff. Honestly, the most typical and also actually I think reasonable feedback I get is, man, Chris, your book scared me, but it didn't tell me anything I didn't already know.
Well, but you, Dr. Martenson, you have a unique ability, I think, to talk about scary subjects without sounding scary, right? So you're very matter of fact. And like you say, it is common sense. But I think common sense, rational thinking, and being able to do the math and look at the numbers, even just basic accounting skills, has to lead us to the conclusion that this global debt-based Western financial system will end. There's no other outcome. So it's rational to say that, but you're able to say it in a way that doesn't cause people to panic and jump off tall buildings, which is a great skill. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I've worked hard at that skill, but I've learned something, which is, so I'm a quick learner eventually. It took me forever, Mike, to figure out that data doesn't change people, because I make this mistake over and over again. I think people are built like me. So I learned slowly that that's not true. I have this extraordinary ability to shift how I think based on data. Maybe it's my training. Maybe I'm just built that way. Maybe because I'm built that way, I got that training. Whatever, however that worked out. So I've learned that actually to be an effective communicator around these topics, it's really important that you do your own emotional work around it first so that you're not asking people on some level to have to join you in some strange emotional territory. Like, let's say, like, I'll tell you. So the first time I read Creature from Jekyll Island, right? This is the book about the Federal Reserve by G. Edward Griffin. Nothing but facts, right? I tell you, that was like ripping a cover off of a sleeping baby. The whole summer I was just angry, and I'm telling my wife at the time, like, wait a minute, I'm screaming paragraphs at her from this book because I couldn't believe it, and it wasn't effective. And so I learned over time that to be effective, I had to first get through my own shock around that, and then I could communicate about those things more effectively.
Yeah, well, you do a great job with that. And so let me start with my questions for you. So one of the things that I think a lot of people are coming to realize the hard way is how economic abundance is tied to energy consumption. And if energy starts to get shut down, and I'm curious to hear your views on green energy, the future of it. How viable is it, or are we far from it? We need obviously increases in energy storage density of storage devices, but when we start shutting down energy as an end in and of itself, we destroy economic activity as a result, and that is happening. Would you agree with that, or disagree? And it's okay. It's okay. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything. We obviously don't. But please give us your straight take on these things.
This is an area of violent agreement because energy is the economy, and I can make this simple. Let's imagine that I give you an option to go on one of two rocky islands. That's it. There's just a bunch of rocks. Plus, one of these islands has a pallet full of $100 bills, and this other one has a pallet full of like pineapples, right? Hope you choose the pineapples, right? Because that's your energy source, right? The money itself is useless in this context. Maybe you could start fires with it if you could bang rocks or something, but get it going. But energy's everything. So I was a mountain climber for a long time. I did high peaks, all this and that. And sometimes we did these multi-day things. And here was the truth. You carried your food, your energy, your calories with you. Your ability to grow your economy, to make it higher up that mountain, was a function of did you have enough calories. And if you got socked in for a couple days with a storm and you burned through your calories, you might, if you were lucky, you had enough to get back down, but you didn't have enough to carry on, right? So energy is really intimately tied. So what I do with people is I ask them to put on their energy goggles. So you're in an airplane, you're in a crowded city, you're looking at a picture of the Earth from space. Think about the energy you're seeing there, not the beautiful spacescape, not, oh my God, there's a traffic jam here that's driving me nuts. None of that. Just think about energy. And when you put those goggles on, Mike, to me, all I see is energy, right? It's like seeing the green code when you're Neo in the Matrix in that final scene, right? Once you see it, energy's everything. And so it's not just energy, though. It's surplus energy. So let's imagine our wonderful gals and guys in the oil business go out and they find a barrel of oil. Well, that's wonderful. But what if it took them a barrel to get the barrel?
That's right.
Well, now the net return's zero. And great, we have this industry that's taken a barrel to get a barrel. We get nothing. You and I and everybody listening to this, we're all here because there's surplus left over after that exercise, right? So they go out and they use a barrel, but they get 100 back like they used to in the 30s. And then it was, now we get 50 back, and then it was 20, and then it was 10. And now it looks like, whether we're talking tar sands in Canada or the shale wells in Bakken or the Permian in the U.S., now we're getting 5 to 1, maybe 6, 7 to 1. It's hard to say because the accounting's kind of weird, but we're not getting what we used to. So there's less and less surplus. All right. What does that mean? Well, if we run our economy on the surplus and there's less surplus, we're going to end up with less economy. But the way people are going to experience that is job classifications are going to go away. It's going to be hard to maintain the complexity. Businesses are going to have a hard time managing it all. This is what it's going to feel like. I submit to you, it's going to feel exactly like it does today. And if you want to just hop forward in the story and see what the future looks like, go to Germany. Right? They've already run this experiment. They hobbled themselves. First, they shot one foot by taking out their coal plants and dismantling their nuke plants and going with their energy the end program, solar and wind. Brilliant program, spent a couple $100 billion, worked it out. They have exceptionally, exceedingly, punishingly high electricity rates to show for it. And then they shot the other foot by cutting off the gas that they got from Russia, without a real fallback plan.
Right.
And so that was
Gazprom. And then Nord Stream too, on top of that.
And then Nord Stream, right? So, so anyway, fast forward, German industrial, energy intensive industries are down over 20%. That's a crater. That's like, we're talking Great Depression. We're talking lower than the depths of COVID, which was a political shutdown. This is an economic shutdown. That's what the future looks like when your energy starts to go away. So fossil fuels are extraordinary, but to one of your points, we already saw in the state of New York, bless their hearts, they decided legislatively they were going to shut down their gas peaker plants where they get 50% of their electricity because they wanted to stimulate more investment in green energy. And that's the Cortez strategy. Your dudes are all tired from sailing across the big ocean.
so you burn the
boats.
Yeah.
There's no way but forward. That's what New York is doing.
But and I know you know this, but this is something probably maybe you don't get a chance to discuss this with many people, but you and I both understand the delicate web of how affordable energy creates the capacity for global supply chains. Because transportation, right? So in order to have global supply chains and get your parts from Korea or China or wherever, you have to have very, very affordable energy. And that energy that powers, for example, the trans-Pacific container ships, those ships don't run on batteries, right? And those ships don't run on sails or solar or wind, and they can't actually. There's not a long enough extension cord, despite what people might argue, in order to do that. So there are certain sectors of the economy, and I know that you know this, Dr. Martinson, I'm just clarifying for the audience, but certain sectors of the economy that will, for many decades to come, absolutely depend on combustion engines. For example, farming, diesel tractors, and I own a couple of them myself. I have some old John Deere tractors, 110 horsepower at the PTO. Well, there's no battery system that can produce that, right? Diesel does it, and it does it reliably and cheaply, and you can store the diesel very safely because it's practically non-combustible, which a lot of people don't recognize for some reason. But your thoughts, Dr. Martinson, on global supply chains and what costs of energy and forms of energy, what their impacts are on the collapsing supply chain itself that we are beginning to experience in the West.
This is such an important line of questioning, and thanks for setting it up that way, because there's so much hype, particularly in the West. By the way, let me separate this. China's not deluded about this at all. Their energy minister, which would be the equivalent of our Jennifer Granholm here, head of DOE, laid it all out, 6-point strategy. I understood it all. They understood the resource issues, the constraints, the adoption cycle, the intermittency, the need for keeping, close relations with energy producing countries, still all of that. So they get it. I'm principally talking West here, Europe, US. And the energy delusions we're under right now are exceedingly dangerous because I can draw a direct connection to our living standards, prosperity. We need energy for those things. But to the point, we live in not just a complicated economic system. It is complicated, right? I don't even know how logistics happens for Walmart, keeping that toothpaste tube tracked and barcoded and stamped in your system so that you can get another one there on time. It's complicated, but it's also complex. And the difference between those two words is complex systems, they have emergent behaviors. You can't predict what's going to happen, right? So we have a complex global economy, and when we starve it for energy, it's now not just an economy we have to puzzle through. It's the intersection of complex humans and complex social organizations and complex politics and geopolitics, all trying to sort through a complex thing, which is, it's going to be a terrible time to try and sort through all of that while we're in an energy shortfall. Right? It's going to be exceedingly different. But all these people, Mike, they're just totally delusional. Wind now cheaper than coal. Like, dudes, if that was true, we wouldn't see wind companies going belly up for financial reasons. We would see it just taken off like wildfire all on its own because nobody has to sell a better energy system. It does it all by itself, right? If something better than diesel came along, we'd all use it. Nobody would have to convince us of anything, right? No sales job. So I'm really worried about what happens when we finally sort of blunder American style. Oh, okay, we'll take this seriously now. Maybe it was a bad idea to burn the boats, right? At that point, it's going to be very, very difficult to pick up and keep moving because it's the analogy would be like, hey, I remember when I pulled a hamstring when I was 18 on the basketball court, but now I'm 60. Yeah, it'll be kind of the same. No, it won't, right?
Right.
I won't have the same recovery energy to go through this the same way. So, that's how I see it.
And this is, let's talk about the environment here for a minute, because I think you and I both agree that we want a sustainable, clean environment. We want energy sources to be as clean as possible. And, down the road, maybe hot fusion is something that is going to be commercially viable, but it's probably a couple of decades away before that could even happen, assuming everything works correctly. And, like I said earlier, battery storage technology is not good. It's ancient, actually, at this point. Lead acid batteries are still being used. Come on. Didn't they find artifacts of that in ancient Egyptian tombs or something? It's ancient stuff. So we don't really have better systems right now. And yet we're being told that we have to transition to these forms of energy that cannot power tractors and boats and also trains. So think about barges and trains. And I know you've covered this before, but if you can't transport heavy materials such as gravel or beans or coal on river barges up and down the Mississippi, for example, at just, we're talking, fractions of a penny per kilogram per mile, right? That's the kind of math that you have to look at. If you can't do that, then you can't actually get coal affordably to coal-fired power plants to produce kilowatt hours of energy that is affordable somewhere, in the 10 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour range. And then everything, if you lose that efficiency, which is powered by coal and diesel, then your electricity prices go through the roof. And then to charge your EV car can cost $500. So it's all intertwined. Your thoughts, please.
Absolutely correct. So let's take it from the tractor side, because I know this pretty well. I got a couple tractors too. And I talk with farmers about this. So every so often we see these ivory tower, I'll call them ivory tower eggheads. And I was one, by the way, for a period of time before I wised up and left. But, I see these guys out of Stanford, right? And they put out these big 60-page PowerPoint decks. They're like, look, it's all possible. I'm like, can we please just talk to real world people quickly, grid scale utility operators, electrical engineers, farmers, because they're like, oh, it's possible. Look, and they have these demonstrations. They have a tractor that they put batteries on, and it sort of worked for a little while, right? Well, but just come out into the field, because when the farmers have to do their harvesting, typically they can't all afford $1.5 million combine, so they share it. And by the way, everybody needs their crops cropped within the same 2-week window.
That's right.
So if you're spending 8 hours charging it and 5 hours operating it, now everybody has to have their own, and they can't afford that. The whole system breaks down. It's just a reality. Even if you could make it work, it doesn't work within the actual process that it would need. It's not fit for purpose, because it's not like the farmers could just sort of share this out and go, well, why don't you harvest in January, Mike? I'll take April,
Right. By that time, the crops are all rotted and molded and gone.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot of this pie in the sky. It's very detached. It's delusional. And
very much
that's
so.
my concern.
All right. So let's take it to a different bullet point here then. For a person listening to this, and I think you have a course of some kind here that I want to get to here so people can learn this as well. Remind me to get to that. But what's the world going to look like to people who have grown up in America and they've only known artificially low interest rates and artificial abundance from counterfeit money printing their entire lives? They've never actually lived in anything resembling price discovery, really, or real markets or real money. And so they've never seen reality, economic reality, I would argue. But what's it going to look like for them in the years ahead?
Well, this is where I get very concerned, because I'm worried a lot of people aren't prepared. And it's not just financially prepared, physically prepared, all that. It's emotionally prepared. They don't have the right mindset to understand what we're about to come up against. And we've had it really easy for a long time. So a lot of people are probably softer than they might want to be coming into this period of time. Now, because the United States had this thing called the world's reserve currency, this is post-Bretton Woods II, this is post-August 15th, 1971, when we temporarily closed the gold window. Still closed. So what's happened is the United States, we've exported a lot of dollars, and they were petrodollars. So the meaning of that is that if anybody in the world, any country wanted to conduct trade and buy oil, and almost every country does, then they needed dollars to affect that transaction. Great. So they're doing that. That's fine if we, the United States, politically, had used the dollar in what I would call a responsible fashion. But, politics, we couldn't resist using it as a club, as a tool every so often. And then we started clubbing more and more often. Well, Mike, everything changed February 28th, 2022, when the United States, because of the Russia-Ukraine situation, said to the world, said to Russia, oh, we're freezing your sovereign central bank reserves. Hundreds of billions, they're frozen in the system because we're America.
That was suicide for our currency.
That was a big moment right there, because it told the world that Russia's sovereign reserves were neither sovereign nor reserves, and the world started making other plans, right? Well, they'll never get by without the SWIFT system. Whoops, they coded one up in a couple of weeks. Well, they'll need MasterCard and Visa. Whoops, they're ready to do that on their own. Well, they'll never conduct cross-border trades with bank messaging. Whoops, they're doing it, right? And this has all been happening way faster than I thought it was going to. So the de-dollarization is happening. Now let's get back to this, mythical American person we're talking about who's not ready. I liken this to, somebody explained it to me once. It's like we were born on third base, but we thought we hit a triple, right? Oh, we're exceptional. We're America. That's why we enjoy these high living standards. But in fact, if our trade balance, which is always in the red, was a country, it would be the 19th largest economy in the world. So that's living beyond our means. We export dollars. We get all this awesome stuff from the rest of the world. Now, if the rest of the world says, don't want your dollars no more, what else do you have? That's when we find everything just shoots up in price. And I'm talking big time. I mean, Mike, I'm talking $300, $400 a barrel oil. I'm talking $20, $30 a bushel for corn or oats or something. I mean, like real hard impacts that people are going to find. If you think it's shocking at the grocery store now, and it kind of is, just wait. There's no way this can turn out well, because we would have to repair this. Well, we'd have to do what China. Do you see China just actually brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Shias and Sunnis. Got them to shake hands and open diplomatic relations. I'd love to be in that meeting. Like, what did you say? That's pretty impressive.
No kidding.
But it's showing that we've lost our currency in the region with the largest remaining pools of exportable oil. That's an important distinction here. And we've also lost our connection and contact with Russia for God knows how long at this point. So that's another point. So basically, we've cut ourselves off from the number one, the number two, the number three exporters of oil at this point in time. That's tricky to come back from.
Yeah, absolutely. And the implications of this are going to be felt, I could say, for years or decades, but really it's going to be felt until the end of the empire, in my opinion. This is a pivot point for the American empire. Now, let me go back to something you said that I think is really key. The SWIFT system, perhaps a lot of people don't know this, but the SWIFT system is really a messaging system. It's simply banks trade messages, and then they're audited to make sure that one bank added this amount to its ledger and this other bank deducted this amount from its ledger. That's it. That's really what SWIFT is. And Russian programmers are some of the best programmers in the world, it turns out, and they can build systems, even decentralized systems, peer-to-peer messaging systems or transactional systems, cryptocurrency systems. And so I want to ask you then about this announcement of what's coming up in August. Russia has announced that as part of this BRICS meeting, they intend to roll out an international transactional clearinghouse system that is rumored to be somehow backed by gold and yet based on a decentralized ledger system, I suppose, resembling cryptocurrency, which, and let me preface this by saying, it would make it the only honest ledger in international trade, because every other ledger can be cheated by the governments that run them, as we have seen, as you just mentioned. So what's the upshot of this? The BRICS meeting, a new transactional clearing system, and also Russian programmers versus American clubbers, to use your metaphor. They're running around clubbing people with dollars.
Yeah, it's a weapon. So this is great. I love it, having conversation at this level, because this is where it happened. So they might have upgraded by now, but Mike, it was probably 10 years ago. I knew I'd heard about the SWIFT system. So I'm in a banking office. I'm like, can I see this thing? It's like, oh, sure. There's a special terminal. They open up the SWIFT system. Here, you'll love this. So the screen that pops up, though, as it's loading, Vista. You remember that old operating system?
Oh my, from the
this
1990s.
Still running on Vista. I'm like, okay. He's like, oh, that's an upgrade, because it was coded in the 70s on COBOL. So the idea that, like, oh, you couldn't recreate the SWIFT system, like, listen, some dudes did it in the 70s on COBOL. I'm pretty sure Russian programmers probably, what did that take? Like a couple of days,
right.
You know?
Open source code can do better.
Absolutely. So we think about, what's money? You know, it's got to be unit of account, store of value, fungible, all that. Actually, it has to have this other thing, which is trust. And so people have lost faith and trust, or actually they do trust now that the United States is going to club people with the dollar. And so if they set up, this would be just, you build a better mousetrap. If they announce that they've set up an open ledger settlement system and messaging system that has a full faith and credit because it's backed by something like gold, just watch. All these countries are going to be, like Nairobi, like, I'll use that instead, right? You're going to see all these countries just stream towards it because, frankly, it's a better way to go forward. And, I was in China a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago again. And I was talking with a fairly high-level Chinese official about all this kind of stuff. And he said to me, Chris, the business of China is business. The business of the United States is war. We think that business is a better strategy going forward, right? And they always have. So, and he gave me this longish tale about how in 1492, when Columbus came over and was skinning Hispaniola people alive, China had a trade delegation running around, a big armada of ships, 2 silver ships, a big flagship, and they went to places like South Africa and, current, modern day Chile, and they brought trade emissaries back as revered dignitaries, and they opened trade routes. It's just a different model, right? So I see the old way of the United States, we project our power with aircraft carrier groups, as being kind of anachronistic and possibly dangerously so in a world of hypersonic Kinsall, Mach 15 missiles and all this. And I just don't think we're going to be able to fight our way through this thing and project our power because we're America. I don't think it's going to work out. I think the past is already over, but our neocons in Washington don't know that yet.
Ooh, good point. I think you're exactly right. They do not know that yet. It's very clear from people like Blinken and Newland and others, and Sullivan in the State Department. They do not know that they're living in the present. That I'm really glad you stated that, because here we are, always constantly talking about the conflict in Ukraine as if the West is beating Russia. And so the U.S. State Department is firing press releases, but Russia is firing artillery. And I've said that artillery is the ultimate fact check, because when those rounds burst and crater near you, you can't dismiss it with propaganda. It's a kinetic shrapnel event with concussive qualities that are life-changing or life-ending. And so here we are looking at America just pushing out propaganda and stories and not even manufacturing the ammunition, Chris, that is necessary to engage Russia in a land war. I mean, you'd have to fire 100,000 artillery rounds a month. We don't make even a fraction of that right now. And in order to build the factories to build that much artillery would take years, and would also take a labor pool that no longer exists in America. There's nobody in America that wants to work in an ammunition factory, period.
Right. I'm so glad to hear you say this. Actually, I think the Ukraine war is a huge game changer. You wouldn't know it from reading the press, right? They're grudgingly admitting that the offensive that didn't happen in spring and now has managed to go 1 kilometer instead of, all the way to the sea is somehow stalled. No, it's a complete failure, and it didn't work out. But against that, we have to understand that NATO emptied its combined warehouses down to the pain point, right? So they say, I can't send more than this many Leopards and all this and that. And so now the United States is sending cluster munitions because we're out of other stuff. Like, here you go. Here's some stuff nobody else will let us use. How about some,
flares,
war criminal
whatever.
Stuff, yeah. And so this is something I actually tracked really aggressively was because I don't believe either side that was like, this was the most heavily propagandized war I've ever seen. All right. So what do I go for? I go for source videos, and I'm watching these little these little Lancet drones that Russia's building for maybe 50 grand a pop with a shaped charge on the front, taking out $5 million pieces of equipment. These cost $50,000. There goes another Bradley. There goes a 777 howitzer. There goes a BMP-2, right? I'm just watching $5 million pieces of equipment go poof, right? One after the other. And I'm very keen to see if I've seen a video before. I'm watching like 10 to 12 new ones a day, right? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this has changed. And I feel like we're at that moment, Mike, like in World War I, there was this famous French general sent 600,000 horsemen to their death, the cuirassiers with the chest plates, right? Sent them to their death because he couldn't figure out that machine guns kind of changed the game a little bit, right? Just wave after wave. So I think we just learned that because of the robotics and the drones and all this and that we have now a whole new game. And so here's what the United States and the NATO military now excel at. We excel at building really expensive stuff that can't be done or redone very quickly, right? You remember you're hearing about HIMARS missiles, HIMARS, and you stopped hearing about them because they ran out. There was nothing to report. They were all out. And those are built down in Huntsville, Alabama by Raytheon technicians with white gloves one at a time. They probably name them, it's not fit for purpose. So I just think we learned that all those years and trillions of dollars got us nothing.
I would say, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's the perfect metaphor for our economy. So you have a highly complex economy which has extreme vulnerabilities because complex systems, as you mentioned earlier, not only do they have emergent properties that are not well understood, but they also have very high vulnerabilities. So one part breaks the system. And you think about just automobile manufacturing, much less tank manufacturing, but also the elements and minerals that go into the manufacturing. For example, just making artillery relies on what's called cotton linters, which come almost exclusively out of China. It actually has to be grown and harvested from cotton in order to stuff the charges that go into the artillery rounds, and cotton linters are in short supply. And that's just one example, but we have a society that is built on such complexity. And I think, Dr. Martinson, I think that we kind of inadvertently, we've been sleepwalking as a species into the surrendering of the simplicity that once gave us redundancy and reliability. And now we find ourselves in such a highly complex society that when the internet goes down for a day or some service goes offline like Amazon AWS, 5,000 websites fail and people lose their minds. And I think it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, it is. And to get to the root of this, all complex systems, that's what we're really talking about, right? Cotton linters and, where do all these components come from? It's a complex system. And so it needs to keep operating. But all complex systems owe their order and their complexity to the energy that's flowing through them.
That's right.
I'm a complex system. So are you. You stop the food going in. If you stop the energy going into my body, I'm going to simplify in about 3 weeks, right?
That's true.
Get a lot simpler. But, the Earth is a complex system. If the sun wasn't there beaming its energy across that complex system, a lot of order and complexity would go away, right? All this beautiful thing we call nature and life. So that's true of our economy as well. And what's happening is it's slowly starting to get starved because all that really high net energy stuff of the past, we're working our way through it. It's not gone, but we're working our way through it. And we're slowly replacing it with tar sands and shale oils and, stuff like that, which, again, it might be an economically useful or even energetically useful thing to do, but it's not the same activity. It's not like, well, we got a barrel of oil out of the Bakken. It's just like Spindletop in 1938, right? No, totally different beasts. And so that's what's happening. And the thing that concerns me is I've been, my first edition of that Crash Course book came out in 2011 and the video series came out in 2008. I thought ta-da, people would sort of wake up to this idea. Like, nope, I got some interest from China, some people who think this way all on their own. And so that's who we have at Peak Prosperity. But, it's basically people who have common sense and can think and stuff. So it's wonderful to be able to hang out with them. But this is really serious. Like, I feel like if I'm going to be that guy out on the sandwich board on the street, the end is near, but I want to tell people, like, this is serious. We don't have any serious plans. We only have plan A, which is somehow we'll get more oil somehow. We're America, we're special. And there's lots of things, though, that we could be doing nationally. And we're not. We're just not doing any. China is, we're not.
Well, in fact, I want to talk about your website, peakprosperity.com. And I love the fact that even the name of your site includes the word prosperity, because really, I think what your information wants to achieve with people is to show them how to navigate these somewhat scary issues that we were talking about. How do you make it through with your assets intact or your sanity intact? Or on a more macro scale, how do we make it through with a constitutional republic intact, right? Or international trade, or all the things that go with international trade. So how about this? Could you just give us a kind of an overview of the Peak Prosperity website and community and your course and whatever you have that our audience can connect with?
Sure, I would love to. Thanks for the opportunity. So this Peak Prosperity, this website's been up since about 2008 or so, and we have a really nice community of people who are all over the world, who fundamentally they want to be educated. They want the appropriate context. They want to have conversations like this. So we set the context, but context without action is just anxiety producing. So we're really about the actions we can take. It looks like we're talking like some stuff that some people on first blush, like, is that doom and gloom? Is like, no, this is liberating, because in fact, we're getting away from these destructive lifestyles, and we're learning about all the things you talk about, which is, hey, there's better health available here. These people over here are trying to keep us fat, dumb, stupid, and angry, right? So let's, get rid of like what our culture wants. And so it's about taking responsibility, fashioning our own lives. Now, the solution space of this is a book called Prosper! We walk people through 8 different forms of capital. Financial capital, absolutely. I believe people should get to financial freedom. It absolutely killed me that people said, well, I had to get the magic holy shot and a booster because I'd lose my paycheck. That's when you're a slave, right? That's, I hate that people got forced. So financial freedom, sure. But none are so poor as those who only have money, right? So we talk about social capital. What is it? How do you build it up? Why is it so important? Your emotional capital, really important, related to your spiritual capital. Your knowledge capital, like, yeah, you can Google and YouTube some things up, but it's different when you've run your first batch of whiskey, or kept your first hive of bees, right? So get the skills, do those sorts of things. Big fans of that. And ultimately, so we're a community of people that are attracted to this kind of thinking. And it's very positive at its heart. We have a subscription service. I keep the trolls out. We got to keep the AI bots out. And this is how I sustain the business. So the subscription service is you get a lot of content and access to the community. And for your listeners, if they go through the process, first 30-day money-back guarantee, you don't like it, no questions asked, we're straight up about that. But for your listeners, if they put in a promo code, Adams50, they'll get 50% off. So whether they want to buy a year or a month, just for your tribe.
Well, there you go.
So just try us out.
So is that on your website? Do they click membership, or how do they get to that?
Yeah, there's a membership that's right at the top. There's a tab there, membership. It'll take you to a page. You'll pick. Got it. Do I want to be, there's 2 flavors. We have these, we have our key supporters. These are people who believe in the mission, and their benefit is any of the events we're going to hold, they get to come to for free. So we have an event coming up here at my farm. This is my home studio, and around about 250 acres here in Western Mass. We got cows and, all that stuff. And so people come here once a year for what we call our honey badger gathering. And about 300 people or so show up. So if the key supporters show up for free, my insiders get a much reduced ticket count. Everybody else pays full freight. So a lot of fun. Wow.
Well, that's great. I'm not surprised that you live on acreage, because, I do too. And I take care of a lot of animals and so on. And I find that that's an important part of the mental health. We have to maintain contact with the real world, even as we spend so much time talking about these abstractions like money.
Yeah.
But if you lose sight of reality, then, you can go too far down the rabbit hole and never come back. I've seen that happen to people. But this is great.
Absolutely. Me too.
Okay. Yeah. So peakprosperity.com. And then the book, again, is The Crash Course. It's available as an audio book. What's the duration of that book, by the way, in terms of audio? Maybe it'll say here.
I should know.
No, I'm trying. Oh, here it is. 12 hours and 23 minutes. I got it. Okay.
That sounds about right.
Okay, that's great.
Yep.
And see, I'd like to recommend this to a lot of people because sometimes I get people, and maybe this happens to you too, but sometimes I'll get people who will discover one of my podcasts and, it's like podcast number 5,722 or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, how could that be? And I need a way to bring people up to speed, which is the crash course, right? It's perfect because it gives people the big picture view of what's happening and maybe makes them more literate about what is money and how it works. So I think your book, your course is perfect for that. Are you getting feedback like that from a lot of people?
Yes, it does a really good job. Since it's been out long enough, I've got probably at this point thousands of pieces of feedback from people saying, big stuff too. Like you'll recognize this. Like, well, I read the book. I had to sit on it for a while. I tried to prove it wrong, but now I own a farm in Georgia, right? Like
Right.
They make big changes as a consequence because it's pretty inescapable logic. There's this whole thing's going to crack at some point. It just has to. We've overdone the monetary system. When your money system breaks, your society breaks, right? That's Venezuela and all its looting today. That's Zimbabwe at the time. It's what our money is our social contract. It's been abused. It's going to break, right? That's just math at this point in time. So I want people to be ready for that. And it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, though, because, we create our parallel systems. And I believe in the lifeboat philosophy, which is that if the whole world goes mad, there'll be people in my own town that get kind of hurt by that. But we're going to be here producing food, got plenty of junk silver to start, restart the local economy. We'll have a way of operating already,
Yes.
which
Very
if
wise.
we're lucky, will put us on a par with, say, the Mormons or the Amish or other communities that are already preformed, ready to, keep moving.
I was just talking about the Amish and the Mennonites the other day and how they would be just minimally impacted by a collapse event. Because, and by the way, as you know, new studies talking about the Amish children have virtually none of these chronic degenerative diseases that plague the rest of society. But, what the Amish do and Mennonites and so on, that's very wise, is they live close to their food. Their supply chain is very small, which creates resiliency, redundancy, locality, you could say, right? And so they can make it through a lot of things. In fact, I think the greatest threat to the Amish is going to be the non-Amish that try to raid their farms to get food. And so I was wondering if Amish have AR-15s or not, but I didn't come up with an answer in my mind. Do Amish own firearms? You would think they would have to as tools on a ranch. Any idea?
Yeah, well, I've met a few that do have, but only as tools, right?
As
maybe a
tools.
shotgun, a 22, just working things.
Yeah, exactly. Probably not battle rifles, but you got to have a ranch rifle. you would think. Okay. Something else I'd like your take on here. Are you doing okay on time if we go another 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was listening to Robert Kiyosaki, and he was quoting somebody who said that what makes people poor is that they don't know the difference between real money and fake money. And I thought that was a very insightful quote. And can you share with our audience what that means to you? And first of all, do you agree with the quote? And what's behind that in your view?
Yeah. So Robert and I are good friends, and I may have helped influence at least some of that. And I know Mike Maloney influenced the rest of it.
Oh, yeah,
and
Mike
Robert
Maloney's
came up
great.
with all the rest of it himself too. Because so the way I deal with this, and this is actually in the Crash Course book, I think people need to understand what wealth is, and we have to differentiate wealth from money, and then money from currency. So here's how I break this down. Primary wealth, that's the land you own, right? It's the soil. If you have rich soil, you're wealthier than if you have really cracked dirt, bad dirt. It's having rich coal seams, fishing grounds, thick timber, all of that. That's primary wealth. A nation with primary wealth can actually develop a high standard of living if it organizes itself well. If you don't have any of that stuff, what are you going to do? You know, you just got sand and you're in the desert, not much happens, right? So primary wealth is necessary for secondary wealth to come out of this story. And secondary wealth is the means of production. It's lumber in the lumber yard. So we went from trees, the primary, to the secondary. So secondary wealth is when humans have done something to it. We've transformed it. It's the factories, the means of production, productive real estate, productive land, arable land, all of that stuff, right? That's been worked in some way. Then tertiary wealth then is this thing it's an abstraction, as you said, right? So it's the money we layer on top of that. So money is supposed to be a call on that stuff. As I mentioned in my little island Rocky example, you could have all the money in the world, but what are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to spend it on either primary or secondary wealth, right? You're going to buy something with it. I like money because I can get food at the store and make the lights come on and do things with it, right? So people have gotten, I think, a little away from this idea that money isn't real wealth. Money is a marker. It's a claim on that wealth. And then debt is a claim on future money, which is a derivative concept. But what we have today isn't even money. It's currency.
Right.
And Mike Maloney does a great job of distinguishing this. And what's the difference? Well, a currency violates one or more of the tenets of money. Remember, store of value, unit of account, fungible. Our money violates that first one. It's not a store of value. In fact, the Federal Reserve tells you they have a target for how fast they want it to violate that principle.
That's true.
2% a year, 3% a year, whatever they're saying, right? So because of that, we have a currency system, and as well, money has that other thing I talked about that should envelop trust. I don't trust the Fed to, they're going to do what they're going to, listen, next emergency, they're going to have to print again, right? But, if you look at what the Fed did, right, it's like, well, we had a little emergency in 87, so we had to print a little. Then we had an emergency in 94, so we had to print some more. Then we had one in 98, so we had to print a lot more. Then 2000, well, that was a real emergency. Now we had to print a lot more. Then 2008, now we had to print a lot. And then for whatever reason, we printed even more than that over 2011, 12, 13, 15, 17. And then COVID,
right.
Now that was a real,
And that dwarfed everything else.
Everything. So to me, it's like a car that got into a light skid. Now we're just spinning the wheel randomly, hoping to not end in the ditch, right? It's going to end in the ditch at some point. And that's when people discover that money, or what we call money, is not real wealth.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's just not.
And I want to ask you about crypto too, as one of the last questions here today, because I have come to realize the intrinsic properties of crypto as being able to have rapid borderless transactions, for example, that governments can't weaponize and governments can't control. They can't control the supply of Bitcoin, for example. So it's an honest ledger. But I've had some people ask me, well, what about the price volatility? You don't know if your crypto is going to go up or down. And my answer is, well, I know for sure the dollar's losing value every day. That's 100% certainty. So I'm willing to take crypto risk because it might go up. The dollar's not going to go up. I don't think they're going to shrink the money supply, right? So, but what?
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Yeah, exactly. What's your take, just out of curiosity, on crypto and the future of digital money?
Well, as long as there's a functioning internet, I think it's a great thing. I do have some concerns there longer term, for reasons, but because Bitcoin has that one thing, right? It's got 21 million total supply, plus some have already been lost, so it's going to be less than that, right? And that's it, right? So that gives it its value, and I think that's what's attractive about it, is this idea that it's out of human hands. That, to me, is any legit money system. And I don't care if it's gold-backed. I don't care if it's, rocks from the moon. I don't care what you use, but it has to be something that humans can't artificially inflate the supply of,
yes.
Right? So I like the idea that Bitcoin handcuffed in the code through the ledger system and said, yeah, no, that's it. That's how many you get, right? And so that's really important because that puts that trust envelope around the currency again. And if I was going to be, wave my magic policy wand, I would say, okay, here's what we do. The Federal Reserve, they can keep doing what they do, but they now have a parallel competing currency. And they, and if we could pay our taxes in either or, right, then let the better currency win. I'm a big believer in competition. I think it starts to right a lot of ships. Fed hasn't had any competition. Remember, they're a private banking cartel. Your listeners know this, right?
Yes.
But they've run amok and they've done what they've done and they've lost the plot line entirely. So I do like gold as that parallel currency. I do like primary wealth, trees, rocks, land, soil, and I do like crypto, not cryptos. Let me just say digital assets like Bitcoin that that the supply is finite and fixed. There's a lot of other ones out there I'm a little more dismissive of. I think they have interesting features that I can sort of make a value case for, but since they can be sort of expanded infinitely, I know how this story ends because it's people involved.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And this is one of the things that gives gold its intrinsic value as well, is that it's very difficult to get it out of the ground. And it's a rather predictable inflation rate of, well, like 1.5% per year or something added to the gold supply. And by the way, takes diesel fuel to get gold out of the ground, right? A lot of diesel. So there's an automatic limitation, a throttle of that. No one's just going to come up with, millions of kilos of gold overnight unless a giant gold rock falls out of the sky, in which case you may have other problems, but
you will.
Right. Yeah. Maybe the sun being blocked for 3 years and food crops not growing, but whatever. Yeah. Well, Dr. Martinson, this has been really fascinating. Did you want to add some final thoughts here?
One last thing. It's related to that 1.5% per year expansion of the gold supply. I can make a case that in the next 10 years that goes pretty close to zero. And the reason for that is that probably complicated a little, but this is the kind of analysis I do all the time back at my site. The United States, we're about 2 years away from understanding that the Permian, which is our only remaining shale basin that is not past peak, right, starts to hit its plateau. We're going to have to wake up and listen to the oil executives operating there and find out that, we're now fully at peak oil here in the U.S. Maybe there's more off the coast, but those aren't opened up and yada, yada. But that's when I think things get serious. So honestly, for your listeners, I don't want to put false urgency on anything, but I think at best, somewhere between 2025 and 2030, this whole story changes. And as you said, it's not just like a bump in the empire's story arc. This is a long twilight of this thing. And I think it's based on the idea that we simply don't have the resources to carry on as we have been. So unless Area 51's got some magic, alien technology energy system, and I'll change my story if that's true, this story is pretty well locked in right now.
Well, don't tempt the commenters who will put they will document all those in the comments beneath this video, I'm sure, of all these different systems that perhaps might exist or not. But nevertheless, in terms of practical matters, it's very clear that if we don't have abundant, affordable, excess energy, then the lifestyle that we've come to know comes to an end. And also, by the way, the dominance of the U.S. empire comes to an end as well. And so does its currency. And Mike Maloney nails it. I've listened. He's educated me on so many issues. I really have to thank him. He's been an amazing educator this entire time. So Dr. Martinson, just in wrapping this up, let me just give out your website again. Peakprosperity.com is the site. And go there, folks, read the articles, listen to the updates. And again, if you want to become a member, the discount code is what, Adams50? Is that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, Adams50. So see, folks, I made it worth your while, saving you some bucks right here. Just type in Adams50. Okay. And then let's see, on Amazon and other booksellers, you can find The Crash Course and An Honest Approach to Facing the Future of Our Economy, Energy, and Environment. So Dr. Martinson, I just want to thank you for the work, the body of work that you're doing, and for taking the time to join us today. And I'm honored that you would do so, and I'm a fan of your work, and I think you're going to help a lot of people get squared away here for what's coming.
Well, likewise, Mutual Admiration Society in play. So thank you for what you do. And thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, absolutely. You're very welcome. The thing is, I make it sound scarier, though, sometimes. That's people tell me, like, why can't you just talk like Chris Martinson, make it all sound, very, very ordinary, kind of. No, not ordinary, but at least manageable. And I'm like, well, okay, it is going to be manageable for those of us who make it. So how do we make it? That's the thing. We got to navigate all this. But folks, it takes different approaches. Some people resonate with different messages, and that's why we love to have people like Dr. Martinson on. If you know someone who his message will resonate with, spread the word about peakprosperity.com, get his books, share his books, and help other people wake up to this, and you may help save lives. So once again, thank you, Dr. Martinson. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care. And thank you for watching. As always, feel free to repost this interview on other websites and other platforms. You have our permission to do so. Just give a link to peakprosperity.com. Thank you for watching today. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon.com. You'll notice we did not censor ourselves in this interview because we believe in free speech at Brighteon.com. Thanks for listening. God bless you all. Take care. All right. Well, that was an interesting interview, huh? No kidding. Yeah. And just what an amazing individual, incredibly well-informed. I did not know until right before the interview that he was going to offer that discount code for membership on his site. I just wanted to let you know that's not an affiliate code. We don't earn anything on that. It's just a discount for you. And that's Adams 50. I think the numerals 50, I think is the way that works. So ADAMS 50. Which, funny thing, is that's what I've written on the side of my Barrett rifle, come to think of it. What a coincidence. But nevertheless, I just want to say, be ready for what's coming. All of the smart people that I know agree that the end of the dollar is near, that the end of Western civilization actually is near, and almost mercifully, the end of the criminal cabal running the United States government right now is also coming to an end, because, I mean, the end is near of that as well. And that might be the one piece of positive news in all of this, because the regime in power is committing so many crimes against America and the people of the world, innocent people everywhere, and crimes against children, and crimes against mothers, and crimes against reason, and crimes against the church, and so on, that, you know, frankly, if something radically changes and we have to sort of reboot society, that's not such a bad thing, is it? I mean, how do we end this madness? And I think the only answer is the madness eventually leads to collapse. I don't think we vote our way out of this. I really don't. I'm not even sure we get to the next election in 2024. I don't think the bureaucracy will ever change. I think collapse is the only way forward, actually. And so we should be ready to navigate that collapse and be ready to rebuild on the other side. And also be ready to arrest the pedophiles, the liars, the propagandists, the traitors, the murderers, you know, the child mutilators, the child traffickers, the groomers, all these people. We should be ready to arrest them all on the other side of this, especially those who have committed treason against this nation. Many of them will try to flee to other countries, of course. I mean, we're living under a criminal cabal. We are living under tyranny, terrorism, by an illegal, illegitimate regime of child mutilating pedophile lunatics. And it's going to end at some point. It'll probably end itself. It'll probably implode and it'll collapse, or something will break. You're starting to see the signs of that now. And then we need to step in, and we need to try to rebuild society rooted in reason and rationality and true justice, true rule of law, and individual liberties and rights and free speech and all the things that the Bill of Rights talks about and that the Constitution mentioned. Maybe with a few enhancements as well, such as the right to keep and bear arms shall really not be infringed. What part of this do you not understand? Like, we should add that language. But anyway, those are my thoughts. It's Friday. Unbelievable. So I'll probably have some special reports for you over the weekend, but I don't know exactly what my plans are. Kind of depends on the way things go. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this combination of news and entertainment and satire. And because half of what I talked about is a joke, isn't it? I mean, we're watching a joke run our country into the ground. It's crazy. But thank you for listening. And I'll be back with you probably over the weekend sometime. All right. This is Mike Adams here for Brighteon.com and naturalnews.com. Take care. I want to give you some resources that can help you prepare, given the topics that we just covered today. Of course, we mentioned the satellite phone store, sat123.com. They are a sponsor of the show. And their backup communications devices really are life-saving, so be sure to check that out. In addition, I wanted to bring your attention to hoplightarmor.com. That's spelled Hoplite, hoplightarmor.com. And Hoplite Armor is American design and American made ballistic body armor that is extremely effective and also relatively lightweight. They've got a lot to choose from here, not just this one armor kit, but I have their armor and it is outstanding. And in addition, shieldarms.com has this new SA9, which is a 9mm carbine. It's a rifle in a pistol caliber. This is available. And they also have the folding AR-15, which I think is highly desirable right now. It's a patented system. It's an AR-15 lower receiver with a folding component that is built in. And so this makes it more compact while still having the full 16-inch length. So this is not a pistol. This is a folding AR-15 rifle. Again, shieldarms.com is where you can check that out. If you're looking for food supplies, be sure to check out my online store, healthrangerstore.com. And we've got the organic Ranger buckets available. We have pallets of these right now. They won't last, especially as the nukes start to fly, obviously. But this is lab-tested, certified organic food. I think you'll really enjoy that. And we have many survival products, healthrangerstore.com. And then also, if you're looking at gold and silver, in addition to checking out Steve Quayle, don't forget to check out metalswithmike.com, which will take you to the Treasure Island page here. And Treasure Island also has been our sponsor for a long time in the gold and silver space. And they not only have outstanding customer service, you can fill out the form and reach them, or you can just go to their main website. You can check out the real-time quotes on their precious metals items as well. And they have an outstanding, very competitive offerings of precious metals with guaranteed discreet delivery. So those are just some resources. Let's see, arcseedkits.com also for garden seeds. And there are other resources that I'll mention from time to time. Just check out my podcast at brighteon.com, and you'll hear about a lot of survival and preparedness strategies and action items that you can take to survive the difficult times that are, well, in some ways already here, but certainly accelerating and getting worse. Thank you for watching today. God bless you all. I'm Mike Adams of brighteon.com. A global reset is coming. And that's why I've recorded a new 9-hour audiobook. It's called The Global Reset Survival Guide. You can download it for free by subscribing to the naturalnews.com email newsletter, which is also free. I'll describe how the monetary system fails. I also cover emergency medicine and first aid and what to buy to help you avoid infections. So download this guide. It's free. It's my gift to you simply because I want like-minded people to survive.